Hello everyone and welcome back to Factnasium, the channel where we explore fascinating facts and insights about the world and ourselves. Today we're going to talk about a very important topic, the difference between pleasure and happiness. You might think they are one and the same thing, or that one leads to the other, but in fact they are very different concepts that have different effects on our well-being. In this video, we'll explain what pleasure and happiness are, how they work in our brains, and why the pursuit of pleasure can sometimes interfere with our ability to find true happiness. We will examine the psychological and physiological effects of pleasure seeking, discuss the role of mindfulness in enhancing our overall sense of well-being, and offer practical strategies for finding true happiness. So stay tuned and let's dive into pleasure and happiness with Factnasium. From the time we are young, we are taught to pursue pleasure in all its forms, eat our favorite foods, play our favorite games, and indulge in any activity that brings us momentary happiness. But as we grow older, we begin to realize that pleasure alone is not enough to sustain us. We need something more meaningful, something that contributes to our overall sense of happiness and well-being. We become so focused on immediate gratification that we fail to see the long-term effects of our actions. We may indulge in excessive drinking or drug use, gamble away our savings, or engage in risky behaviors that ultimately harm us or those we love. Happiness, on the other hand, is a more complex emotion that encompasses not just pleasure, but also a sense of purpose, belonging, and fulfillment. It is the result of living a meaningful life, developing stronger relationships, and contributing to a greater good. Moreover, research has shown that the pursuit of pleasure can actually be detrimental to our well-being. When we constantly seek pleasure and instant gratification, we may become reliant on these experiences to feel happy. This can lead to a cycle of addiction and excessive consumption, which can ultimately lead to negative consequences such as poor health, financial difficulties, and damaged relationships. In contrast, happiness is a more sustainable and fulfilling goal. When we focus on cultivating internal states such as gratitude, compassion, and mindfulness, we can experience a deeper sense of happiness that is not easily shaken by external circumstances. We can also develop a greater sense of resilience and adaptability, which can help us navigate life's challenges with more grace and ease. So while pleasure certainly has its place in our lives, it is important to recognize that it is not the same as happiness. By prioritizing our well-being and cultivating a sense of purpose and connection, we can experience a more profound and lasting sense of happiness that truly enriches our lives. Human history has been marked by an ongoing pursuit of pleasure and happiness. Both of these areas are central to the human experience and have been explored and celebrated in various cultures and societies throughout history. In ancient times, the pursuit of pleasure was often linked to ideas of indulgence and excess. As time progressed, the pursuit of pleasure came to be associated with a more individualistic and consumeristic mindset. In the 20th century, the rise of consumer culture led to a widespread belief in the power of material possessions to bring happiness and pleasure. However, this focus on materialism has often been criticized as a shallow and ultimately unfulfilling pursuit. In recent years, there has been a growing recognition of the importance of happiness as a distinct concept from pleasure. Despite this growing awareness of the differences between pleasure and happiness, our modern world remains fixated on the pursuit of instant gratification and material gain. It is easy to get caught up in the pursuit of pleasure at the expense of happiness, but it is essential to remember that the two are not interchangeable. Ultimately, it is the pursuit of happiness that can bring the most profound and enduring satisfaction to our lives. Pursuit of pleasure is often viewed as a temporary escape from the realities of life, and people who prioritize pleasure seeking over long-term goals are often criticized for the lack of discipline and responsibility. However, this perspective is not universal across all cultures. In some cultures, the pursuit of pleasure is seen as necessary for achieving happiness. The cultural differences in these perspectives on pleasure and happiness suggest that there is no universal definition of these concepts. What may bring pleasure and happiness to one person may be perceived very differently by another. Ultimately, it is up to each individual to determine their own priorities and values. and to find the balance that works best for them, whether it involves seeking pleasure or focusing on deeper sources of meaning and fulfillment. Ultimately, the pursuit of pleasure is not incompatible with happiness, but it requires a certain degree of awareness and self-control. It is important to remember that pleasure can be a means to an end rather than an end in itself. Engage in pleasurable activities that align with your goals and values rather than just chasing temporary sensations of enjoyment. Be mindful of how often and how much you engage in these activities and how they affect your overall well-being. Make sure that your pursuit of pleasure does not come at the expense of your relationships, health, or personal development. Seek meaning and purpose in your life, as these are often more fulfilling than fleeting pleasures. In the end, it is up to each individual to strike a balance between pleasure and happiness that works for them. We can quantify pleasure by counting calories, dollars, likes, or more. Pleasure activates the reward system in our brain, which releases dopamine, a neurotransmitter that makes us feel good. Happiness is harder to obtain and measure. We can get happiness from having strong relationships, pursuing our passions, helping others, or finding purpose. We can't quantify happiness in numbers, but we can feel it in our hearts and minds. Happiness activates the prefrontal cortex in our brains, which regulates emotions, decision-making, and self-control. Pleasure and happiness are not mutually exclusive. We can enjoy both in moderation and balance. However, problems arise when we confuse pleasure for happiness, or when we chase pleasure at the expense of happiness. When we mistake pleasure for happiness, we fall into the trap of hedonism, which is the belief that pleasure is the only good in life. We become addicted to the dopamine rush that pleasure gives us, and we crave more and more of it to feel satisfied. We neglect the other aspects of life that contribute to happiness, such as health, relationships, values, and goals. We become slaves to our impulses and desires, and we lose sight of what truly matters. When we chase pleasure at the expense of happiness, we fall into the trap of escapism, which is the tendency to avoid or cope with reality by seeking distractions or pleasure. We use pleasure as a way to numb our brain, boredom, stress, or anxiety. We avoid facing our problems or challenges, and we miss out on opportunities for growth and learning. We lose touch with ourselves and our potential. So how can we strike a balance between pleasure and happiness? Here are some tips. Be mindful of your pleasures. Pay attention to how you feel before, during, and after engaging in pleasurable activities. Ask yourself, is this pleasure enhancing my happiness or detracting from it? Is this pleasure aligned with my values and goals? Is this pleasure worth the cost or consequence? Be selective of your pleasures. Choose pleasures that are healthy, meaningful, and sustainable. Avoid pleasures that are harmful, empty, or addictive. For example, pleasures that nourish your body and mind, such as exercise, meditation, or reading. Avoid pleasures that damage your body and mind, such as drugs, alcohol, or gambling. Be grateful for your pleasures. Appreciate the pleasures that you have in life, and don't take them for granted. Express gratitude for the people who bring you pleasure, such as your friends, family, or your partner. Share your pleasures with others who might benefit from them. Be intentional about your happiness. Don't rely on pleasure alone to make you happy. Seek happiness from within yourself, not from external sources. Cultivate happiness habits that enrich your life, such as kindness, generosity, optimism, or curiosity. Pursue happiness goals that challenge you and inspire you. That's all for today's Factnasium video on striking a balance between pleasure and happiness. We hope you learned something new and useful from this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who might enjoy it or benefit from it as well. Now, we'd love to hear from you. What are some examples of true happiness in your life? How do you balance pleasure and happiness? Let us know in the comments below. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to Factnasium for more videos like this one. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.